Phosphor Dot friends, Earl at thelogbook.com. Back in the arcades, we've been talking about Gorf recently. I've got a Gorf Jones, and the only cure for it is more Gorf. The evil Gorfian robot empire has attacked, and you need to try to kill them all. Now, this game was released in 1981 by Midway, and obviously on the heels of its success with the American releases of games licensed from outside, such as Galaxian and Space Invaders, both of which were released in the US by Midway. This game did not originate from Japan, but was developed at Nutting & Associates, and it was primarily the brainchild of Jamie Fenton, who originally started this project as a very different thing. This did not start its development life as Gorf. It started as something completely different, and we will discuss that. So, let me get ready here so I can pop a virtual quarter into the machine. By the way, this game is an early specimen of speech synthesis. Now, you could put in 2 quarters and play either 1 or 2 players. If you played 1 player with 2 quarters, you got twice as many lives. And you will need them. Now, obviously, we are riffing on Space Invaders here. It's probably the politest way I can think of to put it. I think Midway had some very creative ideas on what licensing a game from a Japanese manufacturer would actually allow them to do. That was close. Never get stuck in the corners in a shooting game. Yeah, once you take out the cannons in the laser attack stage, then everyone just starts trying to kamikaze you. This is one of the more original, the laser attack stage is one of the more original things about Gorf. This was not. Okay. It's trash talking me. I will have my revenge. Oh, I think I hit the mothership. Wasn't really trying to, but hey, I'll take it. First time for everything. Now, why would Midway take such a huge risk on copying something that they had licensed from someone else? I have a theory about that, and it has to do with that interesting bit of trivia about how the game started its development life cycle. Unlike a lot of slide and shoot games, you can actually change your altitude, although sometimes that's an ability of of questionable usefulness, I'll put it that way. See, even with 6 lives, I'm running into serious problems staying alive. I mean, they don't even change the shape of the Space Invaders from Space Invaders. They just lifted them wholesale. Alright, well I kind of got outflanked there. Alright, little Gorfies. By the way, Gorf is frog spelled backward, but supposedly, in the marketing material for this game, Gorf stands for Galactic Orbiting Robot Force. It also can't pronounce the word cadet. Galaxian was a game that Midway had produced under license from Namco. Okay, that gaining altitude thing actually saved my backside there for a second. I'm going to let it go through the attract mode here for a second to go over some of the trivia and to show you some of the stages that I apparently am not in the zone enough to reach tonight. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Gorf started its development lifespan in 1979. And it started with the last stage of the game. Not the space warp, although that may have been part of the original formulation. It started with this stage, the flagship stage. Now here's what's interesting about that. That flagship, if you flip it upside down, it's the Enterprise. Because Gorf started its development cycle as a tie-in game for Star Trek the Motion Picture. And apparently you were going to be V'ger, or something like it, and you were going to be attacking the Enterprise. Now, my theory is, when that fell through, and there are reasons both game-wise and company politics-wise as to why the Star Trek the Motion Picture license was abandoned. My theory is that the game probably started with the Space Warp screen and then went to the flagship screen. And that was the extent of the game. The Space Invaders and Galaxian lifts were add-ons, as were the laser battle screen, to turn this game into something else, and that's how it became Gorf. As for why the Star Trek side of things was abandoned. Midway may well have been contracted to provide a Star Trek the Motion Picture arcade game, but I have a feeling that the corporate ownership of Paramount Pictures, which at the time was owned by Gulf and Western Industries, it may have pointed out to Paramount that, hey, we bought a company in 1969 called Sega that is also a Gulf and Western company, and they could be developing this in-house, and we wouldn't be sending our money outside the corporate umbrella. So, you think about it, Gorf started as Star Trek the Motion Picture, which didn't happen in time to tie in with the movie, and, probably stopped being a Star Trek game very early on. I don't know if Paramount approached Midway or vice versa, but Star Trek the Motion Picture became Gorf probably pretty early on, and was developed as its own game, while at the same time Sega, which was owned by Gulf and Western, started working on what we now know as the game for which the marquee hangs on the wall back here, Star Trek Strategic Operations Simulator. So, that is the story of, kind of, the meme of how it started and how it's going. Well, it started as a Star Trek game where apparently you were going to try to shoot down the Enterprise. Surely that is every Star Trek fan's dream. And then it turned into Gorf at some point in its development cycle, I suspect pretty early on. Now, the hardware platform for this game was almost past its sell-by date by the time Gorf hit the arcades in 1981. The Midway cart rack architecture, the hardware architecture inside the cabinet, was about to appear later in 1981. I think Kickman, or Kick, may have been the first game to use that architecture. And that also became the architecture behind such games as Tron and Satan's Hollow. So this was kind of the last gasp of the hardware architecture that had brought us the Wizard of War, which had the same speech synthesis chip, and Space Zap, and other earlier Midway arcade games of that nature. This was kind of the last gasp of the pre-Midway cart rack hardware architecture. And, what a way to go out, because, for whatever its long and winding road that it took before it even made it to the arcade, Gorf is a fun game. It kicks my butt, but it's a fun game. The cabinet artwork is fantastic. I love the cabinet artwork with it makes the Gorfian robots, they look goofy here, but they look menacing on the cabinet artwork. So, if you haven't seen the cabinet in person, this Gorf is a game to seek out and play in person to get the full experience. I know we have one at Arcadia Retrocade across town from me, and I always give it a shot, even though, as you saw tonight, it always kicks my butt.